Everyone's commented but me, and I'm really the one that knows what he's talking about when it comes to this Mueller-McGahn matter. Now, it would be foolish for me to pretend that at least some of this article isn't true. It doesn't help us to just blow off this stuff and dismiss it. It is from the New York Times, and the New York Times runs a lot of stories that are highly questionable and biased. But still, if you're trying to discern what's going on out there, since people aren't presenting it to us, over the table, it's under the table, we got to look at this stuff. And the headline of this story on Saturday was, White House counsel Don McGahn has cooperated extensively in Mueller inquiry. Now, what do we actually know? The president has said, I told him to cooperate. I told everyone to cooperate. I'm transparent. Okay. President's early private attorneys advised the president, yeah, McGahn should talk to the prosecutor's office. Almost 30 White House staffers have talked to the prosecutor's office. The president has not asserted, it's not attorney-client privilege. It would be executive privilege. I'm seeing terms thrown around and arguments made even by lawyers that are nonsensical, way off point. Even by McGahn's lawyer, quite frankly. I think his name is Burke. Now let's walk through this slowly and try and make this understandable. We need to unravel it. The relationship of these attorneys to the president and so forth. Don McGahn is the White House counsel to the president. He's not counsel to the office of the president. There is no lawyer that represents the office of the president. I would tell Don McGahn's lawyer, Mr. Burke, there's no such thing. Mr. McGahn is a lawyer to the president as president. He's not his private lawyer, but he's his lawyer that assists the president with presidential matters. But there is no lawyer for the office of the president. That's number one. So let's get off that. Number two, if in fact, we'll play along, as Mr. Burke says, Mr. McGahn is the lawyer for the office of the president, then Mr. McGahn would have independent power to resist the special counsel in order to protect the institution of the office of the president and hence the Constitution. Mr. McGahn didn't do any of that. Mr. McGahn said he had no choice through his lawyer but to appear for an interview with Mr. Mueller and his staff because he was ordered to do so by the president, which of course underscores the point that he's the president's lawyer as president, right? Number three, I have no idea what the president's earlier private counsel were thinking, but the idea that they would agree and in fact argue that one way to move this investigation faster is for the White House counsel, the president's counsel, to be interviewed by the prosecutor is the dumbest thing I've ever heard a lawyer to advise a president, period. The counsel to the president is different even than the chief of staff to the president and all the other staffers. He's a lawyer. He has special ethical obligations to his client, the president, as president. He has a special responsibility to protect the president as president and the Constitution and the office of the president, even though he's not a lawyer for the office of the president. These are things that Mr. McGahn needs to keep in mind, I would remind his lawyer. He spent 30 hours off and on over a period of 9 months, according to the story, being interviewed by the special counsel's office. Now, there's some odd things about this. Just think them through. If you're the counsel to the president, you're Mr. McGahn. How do you continue to serve as counsel to the president and at the same time provide testimony, that is, get interviewed by the special counsel's office? Was there a cutoff point beyond which you weren't providing any additional information? Was this subject limited, or was it open-ended? Because just imagine the damage to the office of the presidency and the president. You're the president of the United States. You have one White House counsel. That White House counsel advises you on presidential matters as they come up. You want to advance your policies as president? You need legal input as president, and so forth. How can he sit in on those meetings, have those discussions with the president, and at the same time, or about the same time, be providing interviews to the special counsel? President may turn to a special counsel and say, look, I want to fire the FBI director. This is what I want to do. So how do I do this? What do I say? What should I do? And he gives him his opinions, and he doesn't expect those to be repeated. But you see, the counsel to the president has his own obligation. And Mr. Burke should know this. Even if the president advises his counsel, go ahead and talk to the prosecutors, because the president's private attorneys think it's a great idea. The counsel to the president, Mr. McGahn, should do what? He should stop being counsel to the president. If in fact he's going to be giving or continue to give testimony or interviews to the special counsel, how can you continue to sit in on meetings with the president or give him advice, verbally or in writing, and run his office, the counsel's office, while at the same time cooperating extensively, quote unquote, in the Mueller inquiry? I don't understand it. Maybe something's missing in this article. And then we hear that Mr. McGahn felt, or maybe they overheard, that Mr. McGahn would be set up as the fall guy for obstruction. Fall guy for obstruction of what? The president is perfectly free to fire whomever he wishes who falls under his tutelage. Yes, including the FBI director, as amazing as that may seem. FBI director does not have independent power beyond that of the executive branch. President runs the executive branch. He's in Article 2. That's who he is. The fall guy, that Mr. McGahn might be the fall guy on obstruction. How's that possible? First of all, there's been no obstruction. The Russia investigation goes on and on and on and on. That is, Mr. Mueller hasn't been fired. Mr. Rosenstein hasn't been fired. Not by this president. Stroke was fired by the deputy director of the FBI, newly appointed, because the old guy is under criminal investigation. Mr. Comey was fired, among other reasons. Rosenstein advised it. But for whatever reason, doesn't really matter. So how could Mr. McGahn be thrown under the bus when there's no bus? This is all very perplexing and troubling to me. And then everybody says, don't worry about what Mr. McGahn may have told the special prosecutor, because there's nothing to worry about. Well, let me suggest this. My good friend Andy McCarthy says, the special counsel Mueller's going to have a tough case to make now to interview the President of the United States, because he learned everything he needed from McGahn. Really? Maybe. Unless, of course, McGahn is saying things that contradict what the president has said publicly, or emphasizes or prioritizes something different than what the president said. And that does concern me, because it seems Mr. Mueller is hot to trot to interview the President of the United States on the quote-unquote issue of obstruction. Right? Now, he doesn't necessarily need the McGahn testimony to be hot to trot to interview the President on obstruction, but he has it. That's the point. He's got 30 hours of it. And Mr. Mueller is hunting the President of the United States. That's what he's doing. He's hunting him. That's what the whole Manafort case is about. Doesn't care that Manafort violated the bank laws and the tax laws and the these laws and the that laws. They already looked at some of that in 2015, 2016, and they moved on. And then they went back to it in the last 18 months or so, or 15 months since Mueller was appointed. So this is really not so easily dismissed in my mind. Now, the truth is, it doesn't change anything for the president when it comes to the Constitution and the law. Presidents should reject any subpoena issued at the behest of the special counsel Mueller. Should reject them outright. The president's not a witness to a crime. The president didn't commit a crime. The president didn't direct anybody to commit a crime. No, Mr. Prosecutor, the president didn't conspire to defraud the election. There obviously was no collusion. We've had an infinite number of investigations by reporters, Congress, the special counsel. Not a single leak of a single criminal statute with the president's fingerprints on it that they can pin to him. Nothing. Nothing. But here's the big picture. Here's why you should be furious. This is what you should resent. This is all a fabrication. All of it. Russia collusion and the interference with the election, because Hillary Clinton and the DNC insisted that this was an illegitimate election after she lost. They kept pushing the Russia narrative. You should be furious that this president, the day he stepped into the Oval Office, has been under investigation in one form or another. He's been under attack in one form or another. The people who hate him because they don't like his style, the people who hate him because he calls them out, the people who hate him because they don't like his tweets, the people who hate him because they think he's unpresidential, they have thrown in with the coup d'etat crowd, knowing damn well that this president hasn't committed a crime, hasn't suborned any criminal activity. Now, another interesting thing in this article was that the special counsel's office acknowledges that they can't indict a sitting president. This is a point I've made for a year and a half now, right? Finally, the professors emeritus, former prosecutors have all figured it out. All they had to do is read the two memos that I read. Well, apparently, Mr. Mueller's read them now, too. So you can't indict a sitting president. President's not a witness to a crime. President didn't direct any criminal activity. The president didn't commit any crimes. So what are we doing? Mr. Mueller's not on trial for anything related to Russian collusion or conspiracy. Mr. Mueller's picked up a few people for this and that. They set up Lieutenant General Mike Flynn. I guess they're proud of themselves, through Mr. Stroke, who's since been fired. So what are we doing? We're doing exactly what I told you on day one. Mr. Mueller is an unconstitutional appointee. Mr. Mueller is conducting himself in a reckless way. Mr. Mueller knows he can't indict a sitting president. Mr. Mueller still wants to turn this presidency upside down. He is furious that his friend Jim Comey's been treated the way he's been treated. He gets energy from the left and the Democrats and the media, who spur him on day in and day out. And he is fighting like hell, Mueller, to impeach this president. You have an inferior executive branch appointee, reports to the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, at least theoretically, who's leading the impeachment charge. This thing is unconstitutional from beginning to end. Unconstitutional from beginning to end. You have sleazy lawyers involved from beginning to end. And who suffers? The president, of course, and the American people. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Mr. Trump's early private lawyer should never have agreed that Mr. McGahn should meet with a prosecutor, special counsel's office. Certainly not without limits on subject and time. Doesn't appear that occurred. And not just to protect this president, but all future presidents. They must be able to rely on their White House counsel. And no, Mr. Burke, who's Mr. McGahn's lawyer, your client does not represent the office of the presidency. He represents the president in the office of the presidency. But he also has a responsibility to give him good advice to protect himself and that office. The idea that somebody represents the office of the presidency is an absurdity. That's number one. Number two, in my view, from an ethical point of view, if Mr. McGahn was providing ongoing information to that prosecutor's office about the president who appointed him and whom he serves, depending on how long this went on for, in my view, he had an ethical duty to withdraw from representing the president. You can't be informed about events that are taking place, discussions that you have, where the president has at least some kind of expectation that he can rely on his legal counsel. I'm not talking about the private matters. I'm talking about presidential matters like firing Comey. And at the same time, that individual can go talk to the prosecutor's office or pick up the phone and fill in gaps. Or who knows what took place. He could have gone back into meetings and said, well, Mr. President, remember when we discussed that? What did you mean by that? I'm not saying that occurred, but the possibility exists. So even the appearance is wrong. So in my view, he should have withdrew and allowed a different counsel to be appointed, or an acting counsel for that matter. As for the underlying issue, obstruction, it is as phony as a $3 bill. It's always been as phony as a $3 bill. If the not so clever prosecutors, and they're not so clever, are thinking about some kind of charge of intent to obstruct without actual obstruction, that is nonsense too. And what's really troubling me here is this prosecutor and his people, who are not elected by anybody, who are responsible really to nobody, are tampering with this election, tampering with the presidency, tampering with our Constitution like nothing I've ever seen before. And I've seen a lot since I was a lawyer in the Iran-Contra matter. We'll be right back. Have you ever heard of a prosecutor writing an impeachment report? Now, what's the problem with a prosecutor writing an impeachment report? That means the prosecutor is using the criminal justice system for political purposes. He's using the criminal justice system to influence a process, a political process, a constitutional process at bottom, but yes, in the House of Representatives. So if he can't actually indict a sitting president, president's not your average citizen, folks. He wouldn't even be in this position but for the fact he is president and he got elected president. So let's not say, I hear the left say, well, is he above the law? No, he's not above the law, but he has to protect the office of the president. He has to protect his presidency. And he has to protect and preserve the Constitution. That's his oath. It's Mr. Mueller, despite what you hear from the left and the media, who is upending our constitutional system. It's Mr. Rosenstein who's doing it. They're bulls in China shop, and they have no comprehension of the bigger picture here. They think they're investigating a bank robbery. But it's not just them, it's the media, either knowingly stupid or actually stupid. I was watching some of this Meet the Press. I had to shut it off after an exchange with Chuck Todd and Rudy Giuliani. And then you could see the other media picking up on it. The stupidity displayed by Chuck Todd, I believe it's an honest stupidity, and his political ideology, gained from years as working as a staff assistant to Tom Harkin, one of the left-wing kook senators, you may recall, who retired from Iowa, and his wife being a leftist. It's obvious the guy is not capable of getting beyond his ideology, and most in the media are not. Rudy Giuliani is an advocate. He's a private lawyer who represents the president. Chuck Todd is an advocate who pretends to be a journalist. Now listen to this exchange. You've been hearing it, I'm sure, all day long, and people mocking it. Rudy misspoke. Rudy didn't misspeak. I'll put a fine point on exactly what he said. Cut 11, go.
Don't tell me that we're delaying this if they're spending a week and a half getting back to us. I don't know why they're doing that, but they're sure as heck not showing any desire to expedite it. I can't get them to write a letter faster than they have. And if you want to start counting up the time that we have taken to draft the letter.
You believe this is on them, that you would have, that you guys have not delayed the interviewing delayed the negotiations.
Yeah, yes, each time by 3 or 4 days so we could write a letter in response. They have taken 2 to 3 weeks to get back to us. So what I have to tell you is, look, I'm not going to be rushed into having him testify so that he gets trapped into perjury. And when you tell me that, he should testify because he's going to tell the truth and he shouldn't worry, well, that's so silly because it's somebody's version of the truth, not the truth. He didn't have a conversation.
Now stop here. This is where Chuck Todd thinks he has a headline. What? It's not the truth. It's his version of the truth? Didn't Kellyanne Conway say something like that months ago? Wow. Now I can spotlight myself. Go ahead.
Truth. I don't mean to go like...
No, it isn't truth. Truth isn't truth. The President of the United States says, I didn't...
Truth isn't truth. Mr. Mayor, do you realize what...
No.
This is going to become a bad
don't do this to me.
Don't do truth isn't truth to me.
Donald Trump says, I didn't talk about Flynn with Comey. Comey says, you did talk about it. So tell me what the truth is.
Don McGahn might
if you're such a genius... Don McGahn doesn't know. If that's the situation,
okay.
We have 2 pieces of evidence. Trump says, I didn't tell him, and the other guy says that he did say it. Which is the truth? Maybe you know right. Because you're a genius.
People, I know you're right. I don't read minds on that front.
All right, let's stop because it gets dumber on Chuck Todd's part as we go on. Let me give you a perfect example. This happens, over a year ago that Comey was fired. So Comey tells his dear friend, Mueller, remember Comey was Deputy Attorney General when Mueller was FBI Director. They go way, way back. One of them has one of their kids as the godson or daughter of the other, which is a preposterous fact to begin with. So Comey tells Mueller, no, he fired me for this reason. This is what he told me. Now we got McGahn in here now. McGahn says, no, he told me this. Trump, I was there. Trump says, here's my recollection. This is what I remember. So there's 3 of them. Maybe they have 3 different recollections. He's not going to punish Comey. McGahn's been talking to him for 30 hours. The only guy that hasn't talked to him is Trump because he's trying to defend the office of the presidency. And then he says, okay, obstruction of justice. This one tells me this. This one tells me this. We believe the President of the United States is dissembling. That's exactly what's meant, Chuck Todd, and you know damn well what Rudy Giuliani was talking about. And by the way, let's assume for the moment all 3 of them really believe that's their recollection. That's the truth. And there's 3 different versions. It's like witnesses to a car accident. Sometimes you get A, sometimes you get B. That's why you need multiple witnesses. So that's what is meant in this context. Who remembers what and how they remember it. And the reason it's a really, really big deal is because a prosecutor who is hostile to a particular individual will not want to believe that individual and will try and make the case that it is that individual who is dissembling, who's lying or deceiving. Just like Mueller and his people decided they didn't want Gates so much, they wanted Manafort. Gates, a proven liar, thief. They charge him with 105 years' worth of crimes, but they charge Manafort with 300 years' worth of crimes. Gates, in the meantime, they plead him down to 2 nothings, where he may not serve 1 day in prison, in order to get his testimony against Manafort. Now, this is what prosecutors do. Giuliani was a U.S. attorney and a damn good one. This is what he's talking about. Let's hold on a second here. Bob Mueller is not God. Bob Mueller is not pure. Bob Mueller is not a judge. A judge has a completely different role. Bob Mueller is a prosecutor. He's looking for people to put in prison. That shouldn't be the role of all prosecutors. They're supposed to try and pursue the truth. But that's clearly not the case with Mr. Mueller. If Mr. Mueller was trying to find the truth, he'd already concluded there was no collusion between Trump and Trump World and the Russians that interfered with the election. Got a couple outlier conversations and so forth, but it's not illegal. It's not criminal to talk to Russians, even during the course of a campaign. It's not criminal to want to talk to them if they think they have information, but information hasn't passed. There's no evidence that there was any, in fact, collusion. And the operation closes. But that's not what he's doing. That's not what he's doing. Now, Giuliani says they have 1.4 million documents. Do you know how many documents that is? Do you know what that looks like, 1.4 million documents? That they've interviewed over 24 White House staffers, including McGahn, President's counsel. We've had endless congressional hearings with Democrats on the committees. Nothing has leaked to create a criminal connection of any kind to the President of the United States or anyone around the President of the United States. If there were a smoking gun, it would have leaked by now. And you have thousands of so-called journalists who are taking leaks from partisans, who are taking leaks from law enforcement, leaks from the intelligence agencies, digging on their own, they've come up empty. Now, this is what's meant by a perjury trap. Mr. Mueller doesn't want to interview the president because he's actually interested in gleaning some information he can't get elsewhere. He wants to interview the president in order to catch a conflict of memories, if you will. Now, let me tell you something. If the president's current lawyers are competent, and they appear to be, and Mr. Mueller triggers the issuance of a subpoena, they can lay out the case, chapter and verse, for the court. That a subpoena to compel a president to sit for a perjury trap simply cannot fly under our Constitution. They can't say they're not getting documents. They're getting a zillion documents. They can't say they're not getting access to people with knowledge. They're getting access to all kinds of people. But you can't demand the appearance of the President of the United States for an interview or a grand jury appearance. Some people say period. And then have really no basis to do so other than to try and trick the President of the United States. I have to believe there's enough good judges left, certainly on the Supreme Court, to understand the insidious nature of this. A couple other points I'd like to make. And I've made them before, but it's time to underscore them. What's to stop any of the over 90 United States attorneys in this country from issuing a subpoena for the president to testify on such limp and minor reasons, if Mr. Mueller can get away with it? And I want you to think about this. You're a really smart audience. That's why I'm getting into the weeds here. The argument is that Mr. Mueller is not a principal appointee. Therefore, he didn't have to be nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate in order to serve in his slot. Therefore, he's a constitutional appointment, they're saying, because he reports to a person who had to be confirmed by the Senate, Rosenstein. Great. But the United States attorneys in this country, over 90 of them, all had to go through that process. They had to be nominated by this president and confirmed by the United States Senate. They are principals. They are more senior. They have more power, the argument goes, than Mr. Mueller. Well, if Mr. Mueller can issue or have issued a subpoena against the President of the United States to appear in person to give testimony, then what's to stop those principal prosecutors who are at least theoretically under our Constitution? If you listen to Judge Napolitano and the others, if they're more senior, the U.S. attorneys, they're principal appointees, officials, then Mr. Mueller, and Mr. Mueller can have a subpoena issued, then what's to stop the U.S. attorney in Rhode Island from doing the same thing if he thinks he has a case? Not a case against the president. We just want to know, what would stop the U.S. attorney in New York, for God's sakes? Nothing. Nothing. Oh, and one other point. If the potential exists that a prosecutor will be free to question a president of the United States about the firing of a subordinate, CIA director, FBI director, the attorney general, the secretary of agriculture, whatever, and they assert that it was done for some nefarious reason, what's to stop them from politically blackmailing a president? In the confines of the Oval Office, you can hear the discussion. President says to the CIA director, I'm not happy with your work. I'm going to replace you. Well, you better not do that, Mr. President, says the CIA director, because I'm going to tell the U.S. attorney that you threatened me, that you demanded that I do X, Y, Z, and A, B, C, but that's not true. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He can question your motives. He can question you. And I'm going to drag down your administration for the next 12 months. I'm going to help trigger an investigation. What do you think of that? I am gravely concerned about what's being done here to the office of the presidency, to the Constitution of the United States. I'm gravely concerned that the president's early private lawyers were incompetent or foolish. I'm gravely concerned about what's going on with the White House counsel. I'm gravely concerned that we have an out-of-control prosecutor who has as his purpose, Constitution be damned, to write an impeachment report to take down this president, and he hopes, maybe, to drag it through the courts. Maybe he'll get lucky, he figures. I'm gravely concerned about this president and future presidents. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Maybe I ought to take like a 3 or 6 month leave of absence and help represent the president. What do you think about that, Mr. Producer? Now, I want you to think about something. All this talk, and the best the prosecutor has is the president intended to obstruct justice? The president, what, took steps to obstruct justice? I mean, he's the prosecutor in the Russia matter. Has anybody stopped him? No, of course not. That's just stupid. No, that's not the case. Let's see here. Tom, Ridgecrest, California, Sirius Satellite. Quickly, sir, go.
Yes, sir. I have an 8-year-old and an 18-year-old.
All right. Congratulations.
The 8-year-old, every single thing, I asked her mom if we were going to fill out lunches.
Oh, for God's sake. Sir, call when you're sober, will you? Jeremy, Lakeland, Florida, on the Mark Levin app. Go.
How you doing, Mr. Levin? It is a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you, sir. We got 1 minute.
All right, real quick. I just heard you speaking about Mr. Mueller's going against the president, trying to find an obstruction for, the reason why he would have fired.
The intent.
So there's a case law with the Supreme Court that's kind of already addressed this. It referenced Wren versus United States, where D.C. police officers they were narcotics officers, conducted traffic
Sir,
stops.
that has absolutely nothing to do when the president's involved in one branch of government. There is no precedent whatsoever. Zero. A drug case has nothing to do with it. Nothing. No offense, I'm just saying. This is new stuff. This is big-time stuff. I'll be right back. In order to further clarify these various issues, because they can complicate it, I think I'll do something fairly rare. I'm going to go to the callers and try to clarify based on questions or comments that callers make. All right, so now we're going to take some calls early for the purpose of trying to clarify any confusion on the circumstances involving McGahn, obstruction of justice, subpoenas, what have you. All right, let's get started. And I want the callers to really step it up. Make sure you're sober. That's the number one test. Gene, Indianapolis, Indiana, the great WFDM. Go.
Yes, I'm going to make 2 quick points, and then I'll hang up and listen to your responses. I don't think that Mueller was ever going after Trump for collusion or for the Russia thing. I believe he was going after him for taxes and finances just like he's done with Manafort and the others. My second thing is, and I could be wrong on this.
Well, let me slow you down a second. He has a funny way of showing it, though, since he hasn't subpoenaed any of Trump's taxes or finances.
Right, but that would be one of the things that only Trump could answer versus everybody else for these interviews.
But I'm saying he hasn't even requested any documents.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, then that was just my off-the-wall.
Okay. Yep.
My second thing is I've been told it costs $25,000 for a security clearance, and that we have 5 million of them out there that are renewed every 5 years, and I'm thinking that's a heck of a bill for the taxpayer.
Let me correct that. I don't believe there are 5 million of them renewed every year. There are 5 million of them, but not all of them are renewed.
They've got within 5 years.
But to underscore one of your points, they're enormously expensive. They go back to elementary school, to middle school. We used to call it junior high, high school. They go back to any. If you rented an apartment, they go back and talk to any landlords. They try and find anybody who used to live with you when you were next to you when you were, say, in your 20s and so forth. They go through. They interview former teachers. I mean, they travel the country. And the more extensive your background, the more extensive the work is involved in tracking things down. And then if somebody says something that is troubling, then they have to pursue that. A full clearance can take 8 months, 9 months, a full year. And it is enormously expensive, which is also why an incoming administration has what they call temporary security clearances, because obviously they can't function with their own people if they have to sit around and wait for these long security clearances to take place. It's one of the reasons that I object to what the President's Chief of Staff, Kelly, who I like very much. I don't know him. I've met him once in my life, and I respect him enormously, but that's one of the reasons that I object to the way they're handling security clearances. The media have kind of they've reacted to the media, which attempted to force him in this position, given a few personnel matters that took place, but this broad brush approach on security clearances, that results in you not being able to fill key positions with people you want. Anyway, Gene, thanks for that point. I appreciate it very much. James, Denver, Colorado. How are you?
Oh, good, Mark. How are you?
Good. How are you listening to us?
Mark LEVIN app on iHeartRadio.
All right, go ahead.
All right. So I was listening to your comments about, potentially opening up, being able to call in the president for questioning,
No, I don't think he can call in the president for questioning.
Well, no, but you were talking about if we try to set this precedent and then all of a sudden, any prosecutor can try and get the president to come in and answer questions. I think that's what I understand.
Yeah, go ahead. Yep. Go ahead.
So I was reading a Yahoo article a few weeks ago, and apparently all three Democrats that are running for the New York State Attorney General position have all vowed to some degree or another launch investigations into Trump.
Mm-hmm. Of course, those are state, and that would raise a different issue with respect to subpoenaing a president. But what's going to happen now is you're going to get more and more of this stuff, more and more judges ruling on this stuff, and all of a sudden the office of the presidency is horribly weakened. And for what? For what? What's happened here exactly? The president hasn't done anything. What are they going to subpoena? Because they want his testimony to see if, to ask him about what is a presidential prerogative. That is the firing of a subordinate. It's crazy.
Right. Well, this article basically alluded to the fact, and I think the teaser headline was this lady, and she was one of the candidates, could be much worse news for Trump than Mueller. And basically it alluded to the fact that any New York State Attorney General is going to go in with a fine-tooth comb over all his business dealings because that's where his residence and business is. Okay, so you're talking about a different issue altogether. That is, they want to investigate his finances, his residence, and so forth. Let me ask you a question about this beyond the Constitution. Have you noticed the extent to which the media accept the relentless legal
and partisan attacks on this president that are outside political norms. So they're going to use the legal processes in the state of New York to try and damage this president. And nobody cares. So what you basically have are these blue state hacks who get elected to office telling their hack constituents, you elect me, and I'll take down the president of the United States by hook or by crook. I'm telling you, this is Venezuela stuff. This is Zimbabwe stuff. This is this is just incredible that we have a republic like this that's collapsing from within. Thank you for your call, sir. Just to show you how ridiculous Mueller and his team of Democrat liberal donors actually is, I want you to keep a couple things in mind. Now, they have dragged the Manhattan Madam in front of a federal grand jury. We have Stormy Daniels. Yeah, is this a clown show? What is this? What is it? Is this a clown show? I'm starting to think it is a clown show. And by the way, whatever happens to Manafort in that courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia, whether he loses, whether he wins, whether it's a draw, whatever, Mueller's lawyers have not been impressive. They've made a number of mistakes during the course of that prosecution. So I would advise the president's lawyers, the law's on your side, the Constitution is on your side, the facts on your side, and these guys are not 10 feet tall Amazons. If they just do good lawyering on the president's side, I think he'll turn out just fine. You're going to subpoena the president, not to testify by any crime he committed, even though you admit he can't be indicted in any event, or any president, but because you want to try and trick him. Now, I don't think there is a serious court. There are Obama appointees and Clinton appointees, but I mean a serious court that would think that is appropriate. So there's just an enormous number of issues that could be raised against Mueller and his team. Constitutional, other legal issues, and, of course, factual issues. Rick, Jonesboro, Arkansas, on the Mark Levin app. How are you?
Hey, doing great. Wow. A little starstruck, but I'll try to make my point quick.
Don't worry.
And get off so you can do your thing. Just listening to the interview, the interviewer, Chuck Todd, it seems to me like he is exactly proving Rudy's point by taking what Rudy said and turning it into another truth, and then the news media taking that truth that they've spun and running with it instead of taking what Rudy said as, you know, everybody who listens to that with any common sense can figure out what Rudy's trying to say. But they are intentionally twisting it.
Absolutely. And, of course, the prosecutor's not a judge. The prosecutor's an advocate, right?
That's correct. And, I mean, the whole thing is, I mean, they're doing it right in front of everybody, proving Rudy's point right in front of everybody for everybody to see, take what Rudy said and twist it into something that he didn't say. And the truth isn't the truth.
And also, to your point, look what they did to Michael Flynn. The first round of interviews with the FBI, they said, look, he had a memory lapse, no big deal, that's the end of it. Peter Strzok, who has an agenda, he goes back, he circles back, same thing, sets up Flynn, and now Flynn is broke. He's had to plead guilty. He's trying to find ways to pay his lawyer. They charge him, he's pled to one count of false statements. The thing's a mess. This guy, Mueller hasn't shown good faith with anybody, has he?
No, and it's the double standard is sickening in this whole thing. Trump or anybody on his team cannot say anything right, and anybody on the Democrat side, Hillary, they can't say anything wrong. I mean, nothing they say, nothing they do is wrong.
Let me add this. So they dragged this Manhattan Madam in front of a federal grand jury in Washington, right?
Correct.
They didn't do anything on the Hillary side, where there is actual Russia taint, whether it's the dossier or anything else. They're not dragging any of them in front of that same federal grand jury. So really, how much does Mueller want to get to the bottom of this? Well, I was limited to Russian interference in the Trump campaign. Really? And that brought you to the Manhattan Madam? Is she Russian? I don't think so. All right, my friend. Thank you for your call. Bill, Alexandria, Virginia, the great WMAL. Go.
Yeah, Mark, first of all, your analysis, as usual, is spot on any of these topics. I'd like to emphasize two things. One is the fact, and I'm a retired lawyer, Mueller should never have taken this job, and that's obvious. Anybody that in his position should have known that he has a total conflict of interest in this. But the second point, I don't think anybody really realizes it, is the president is very good about his analysis, and I don't think he fears the issue of impeachment whatsoever. And
well, I happen to know that's not correct. Not fear is the wrong word, but he's well aware of it, I am told. And that's why he's going to be campaigning 60 days out from the election almost every day. He'd be a fool not to be concerned about it. He doesn't want to destroy his presidency and be bogged down with endless subpoenas.
Yeah, but I think my point is that he knows that he's in the right and that he's going to beat anything that comes up against him.
But you can't, listen, he may know he's in the right. But if you have a house full of Democrats and a significant majority, whether you're in the right or not, they can vote to impeach. They shouldn't, but they have the votes. And unless he wants to live in a living hell with subpoenas and endless attacks and can't accomplish a hell of a lot, of course he's worried about it. He ran for president to be a president. He ran for president to get things done.
Yeah, but I think that.
All right, thanks for your call. Doesn't matter what I say. He's a nice man, but I'm insisting that I'm right, and I'm insisting on that. But you're not right. Of course, the president's concerned about it, and he has every reason to be concerned about it. We are all concerned about it. I'm afraid that attitude, unwittingly, is going to result in a Democrat landslide. We have to be concerned. We have to have some fury. We got to get out and vote. We got to corral our people to vote. The president wants us to vote. Why do you think he goes to these rallies and backs candidates and asks you to vote for them? It's not a matter of fear. It's a matter of concern that the Democrats might take the House. And even apart from impeachment, do we want these leftist socialists in the House of Representatives driving up spending even more? I mean, come on. Can't be Pollyannas about this. We've got to take this very, very seriously. The barbarians are at the gate. The left is at the gate. Oh, don't worry. We're not worried. I'm worried about it. There you have it. I'm concerned about it. And we should all be. And we need to be fired up, not blasé and passive. That's exactly what they want. All right. Lou, Milford, Connecticut, the great WABC. Lou, I don't know how you get through all the time, but you speed dial or something? Hello, Lou, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
So Rosenstein.
All right, we don't have a good connection. Robin, Springville, Florida, Sirius Satellite, go.
Yes, Mr. Levin, I'd like to find out more information on the FISA warrants. Supposedly there were 4 of them. Are they still each one active, or is the latest one active?
No, the last one expired, 90 days, and they're out. As far as we know. So there are no active investigations of Carter Page and company. So you got to extend them, and they haven't extended it a 5th time. Rosenstein had extended it a 4th time because he's such a brilliant man. I'll be right back. Rudy Giuliani says, look, it takes us a day, 2, 3 to write a letter, respond to the special counsel. It takes him 2 to 3 weeks. Why is he dragging this on? The election. There's another reason. And I'll point it out now. So the professor from Harvard, the professor from George Washington, but more than that, they can repeat it, but more than that, so the White House lawyers listen to me. I've been thinking about this during the break. Mr. Producer, I was testing it on him. Do you know why it's taking 2 or 3 weeks? Who is Mr. Mueller's supposed boss? Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General. And they've made the argument in court when Mr. Mueller's appointment has been challenged that he does have a boss, Mr. Mueller. He's not an independent operator, and his boss is the Deputy Attorney General, Rosenstein. Mueller is conferring with Rosenstein. And together they're trying to figure out what to do. And Rosenstein is the acting Attorney General. He's running the Department of Justice for purposes of this investigation. It's as if Jeff Sessions doesn't exist. So Rosenstein's the acting Attorney General in charge of the Department of Justice. Mr. Mueller, at least theoretically, reports to him. I do not believe Mr. Mueller will make a decision on a subpoena or his next step without consulting with, better word, colluding with, maybe even conspiring with Mr. Rosenstein. And that should be a significant cause for concern because he has very, very poor judgment. The original appointment of Mueller demonstrates that. That's part of the reason, if not the most important reason, why it's taking so long. Mr. Mueller wants to cover his tracks. He doesn't want to be hung out there by himself. Mr. Mueller wants the backing of the Department of Justice and Mr. Rosenstein should he take what would be a historically unparalleled step to damage the presidency and the Constitution. I believe that's what's going on. Now, all the backbenchers, feel free to repeat it. All the legal scholars, quote unquote, all the professors, former federal prosecutors, defense counsel, all over cable, go ahead and chew on that, because that's what's taking place. No doubt about it in my mind. Sean, Portland, Oregon, the great KUFO. Go.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for taking my call.
You got it.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about how, I think the modern news cycle and all the mouthpieces on the left like to act like everything that we're seeing right now is just totally out of the ordinary, like nothing like it has ever happened before. But the fact of the matter is it's pretty much the Democrats' MO for at least the past half century to every time a Republican is in the White House to try to either make their presidency illegitimate or to say that they're unfit to be president for one reason or another. I mean, Al Gore tried to sue George Bush to get the Supreme Court to take the elections. With Reagan, at first they were trying to say he was corrupt and treasonous, and then when that didn't work, they tried to say he was...
Iran-Contra, they tried to remove him. Nixon, they were successful. I get your point. George W. Bush, they actually introduced a number of them, articles of impeachment that he lied about Iraq. You're right. They're always constantly trying to remove the Republican president. I don't know of anyone who actually filed impeachment. Maybe there was one, or there were one or two congressmen on Barack Obama. Do you?
I can't think of any.
Mm-hmm. But it's a great point. They always try to delegitimize whomever the Republican is. The problem is you have these idiot Republicans that go along, like Bob Corker. Bob Corker was personally dissed by Trump, and he's spending the rest of his lame career in the Senate, a few more months, trashing the president every chance he gets. And there's a handful of these guys. Jeff Flake, same thing. Ben Sass of Nebraska, same thing. Good call, Sean. I appreciate it, buddy. Take care. Let us go to Bobby Ray, Williamsburg, Virginia, beautiful town, on the Mark Levin app. Go.
Hey, Mark, I wanted to tell you that there already is in place a justification for taking away classification or clearances. It's an executive order signed by Bill Clinton. Excuse me, and it in 1965 or 1995. The operative paragraph, subparagraph says, access to classified information shall be terminated.
Why are you so out of breath?
I ran from one room to another.
All right, settle down. You're going to have a heart attack on the air. That may be entertaining, but we don't want it to happen.
I got you. Okay, the operative subparagraph, it's 2.1B4, Access to classified information shall be terminated when an employee no longer has a need for access. And I think that's...
Well, it's need to know. We've been talking about that. They don't have a need to know. You're right. But you see, they've twisted that to mean, well, we may need John Brennan's cogent, thoughtful, temperate advice. So we need him to retain this clearance. It's a ruse. Nobody wants to hear from John Brennan except the kooks on MSNBC and CNN and the like. There's nothing to say. The man is, if he's not certifiably insane, he ought to be.
Well, he certainly comes off wacky when he's on TV, on CNN and MSNBC. So
he says that Trump has connections to the Russians. He has no evidence whatsoever. Even the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Richard Burr, woke up from his long and desperate snooze. And he said, well, if you have it, let's see it, because you haven't shown it to us yet. It would be like me saying, Brennan's always had ties to the Soviets. Matter of fact, he voted for one of their puppets, Gus Hall. So Brennan has more ties with Russia than Trump could ever dream of.
Yeah. Well, this all started when Trump made that wisecrack about checking the emails.
That was a joke, and everybody knew it. When he told the Russians, we can't find Hillary's emails, maybe you can. It was hilarious. And to think that may have been it, I don't think that was it. I think that's an excuse. I think this stuff against Trump was going on for a long time in the Obama administration. We had rogue senior FBI agents, rogue senior intelligence officials. Listen to them now. Listen to them now. These are the same people who used to be holding these positions. We'll be right back.